While you all are getting settled in, welcome to Bill. My name is Cindy Oyoung, and I lead our diversity, equity, and inclusion function here at Bill. And I thought I would just start off by telling you a little bit about Bill before we transition into other parts of the program, because I'm sure many of you are not familiar with Bill. This might be your first exposure to Bill. So Bill, basically, we are champions for small and mid-sized businesses. And what we do is we help those businesses pay their bills, hence Bill, right? We do other things as well related to helping them make their financial back office operations efficient and effective. But that is sort of the core of how we got started 17 years ago as a business. So you can imagine over 17 years, we've grown quite a bit, where we're at a point of about 2,200 employees today across 3 offices. So San Jose, this beautiful office that you're sitting in today, is one of 3. We also have an office in Draper, Utah, and Houston, Texas. And we actually do over $1 billion in revenue in our last fiscal year. Right? So pretty good, I think, right? We serve over 460,000 customers, both here in the US as well as internationally. And obviously we have a huge commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion here, which is why I'm so proud that we're able to partner with the Silicon Valley Urban Debate League to host the students and have this amazing dialogue with you all today. So thank you all for being here, for being part of this, for coming and for participating through the next hour and a half-ish of our event. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I'm enjoying hosting you all. And with that, I would like to turn this over to Raj Aji, who is our Chief Legal Officer here at Bill, who would also like to share some opening thoughts with you.
Thanks, Cindy. I'm going to read from a sheet of paper. I was a debate judge for 4 years when my daughter was in high school. And I know you guys are sharp, so I didn't want to mess up. And frankly, my memory is not what it used to be. So I'm going to read. I'm thrilled to welcome you to Bill, and that we have this opportunity to host the Silicon Valley Urban Debate League's high school debate. SVUDL's mission, and I looked it up on the website, SVUDL's mission is to help youth from diverse backgrounds tap the power of their voices to compete, excel, and change the world. Now, using the power of debate to excel and make a difference in the world is a mission that's very close to my heart. You know, as humans, we possess this unique ability amongst all species. I mean, chimpanzees debate, but we possess this unique ability amongst all species to debate and have the capacity to settle disputes through reasoned discourse rather than resorting to violence. Debate is based on the exchange of ideas, evidence, and arguments, which is the core to this ability and our civilized interactions as humans. Our institutions, which are the pillars of our democratic system, are based on debate. In the past few years, we saw this firsthand, right? In 2020, one of our presidential candidates disputed the results of our elections, and we settled it through debate in our legal system, going up to the highest courts. If you think about it, contrast that with what Russia did recently, and how they dealt with their most prominent opposition leader who challenged their election, right? I mean, debate is the core to our institutions. Beyond the courtroom, you see debates in all walks of life. You see debates in the way we run our business and in our boardrooms. At Bill, as Cindy said, we develop these great products for small and medium businesses, but we develop our company strategy. We hold ourselves accountable, And then when we design our products, we do it through a healthy debate and discussion amongst employees. So debate's there everywhere. Whatever you do, you don't have to be a lawyer. In all walks of life, you have debate. The importance of our institutions and the reliance on the principle of debate is what inspired me to go to law school. I was the first in my family to immigrate to the US as a 22-year-old. Till I was 17, English wasn't my first language. My first job after college was in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. When I was in D.C. as a young 23-year-old, I was surrounded by institutions like the Department of Justice, the Environmental Protection Agency, the ACLU, and other great institutions. I was inspired by how debate shapes these institutions, whether they're in public forums, courtrooms, or in policy meetings. So I decided to go to law school. I went to law school to be educated on the principles and importance of debate and using the power of my mind and my voice to be heard and engage with society. And it's turned out pretty good. I've been grateful for what that education has given me and how it's really shaped my life. So I'm a believer in the power of debate in society. Today I look around, I was there decades ago, where you are, and I'm happy to see so many of you as you begin to find your way in the world, working with the debate league, with SVUDL, to develop your own debate skills, your oratorial skills, you're practicing empathy, and more importantly, strengthening your understanding of different perspectives. I am looking forward to seeing how you use these skills and what the future holds for you. Now I'd like to welcome Roland Janeiro, the Executive Director of SVUDL, to really get things going.
Thank you, Raj.
Thanks, Roland.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you to Bill. Thank you to Cindy and Raj for the warm welcome and the introduction. Thank you to Bill for hosting us. Students, please take advantage of the opportunity, meet everyone you can from Bill and get to know them. Thank you to the Mahakama Foundation for the generous support, but also building the connections that helped the event tonight happen. As Raj mentioned, SVUDL helps students uncover the power and hone the power of their voices so that they can confidently step into their full potential as community and professional leaders. So although talent is everywhere, opportunity is not. So providing access to the students to new people and experiences like being at Bill today, SVUDL gives students a chance to explore careers that they didn't know existed and continue to imagine a bigger and brighter future for themselves. So to the Bill folks in the audience, the connections that students make with professionals like you all help support their academic and professional journeys. So please take a moment, if you can tonight, to get to know them. Our team at SVUDL has the honor and privilege of working with nearly 2,000 students across 19 high schools in the Bay Area, both inside the classroom and after school. We help bring speech and debate programming to both Santa Clara and San Mateo counties so that students will strengthen the very skills that are necessary to succeed in higher education and the workforce beyond. Things like critical thinking, argumentation, research, and public speaking. Just this past Monday, I had coffee with a friend on Monday morning, and she shared a job description of a executive level position at an AI tech startup. And she shared this job description because it said, and I quote, "We're looking for someone who has been on a debate team in high school. You are a critical thinker who is organized, thoughtful, and can turn vision into reality." Employers know how important it is to strengthen these skills, and we are honored to work with students to strengthen them and prepare them for their futures. So to all the Bill folks in the room, if after today you want to learn more about our organization and get involved, feel free to reach out to me or any of our staff members. We'd love to have you join the family. So tonight is a great illustration of our work in action. Soon, 3 of our students from SVUDL will be debating a complex, hot-button topic related to free speech on college campuses, the very locations that most of them hope to set foot on in the years to come. As with many issues in life, there are no easy answers. Tonight, I expect that the three of them will be exploring nuanced understandings of this complex topic, while simultaneously modeling the skills of argumentation, disagreement, and civic discourse. I look forward to learning from them. So with that, it is with great pride that I introduce Nejma Ali. Nejma is a program specialist with our staff. She's also an alum of our program. She graduated from Oak Grove High School in San Jose. She's also a proud graduate of UCLA. And any day now, she will be figuring out where she's matriculating to law school in the fall. She will be introducing you all to tonight's debaters, the topic that they will be discussing, and then she'll also facilitate the Q&A with you all thereafter. So without further ado, Nejma, take us away.
Thank you. All right, thank you for that introduction. Once again, my name is Nejma Ali. I am a program specialist at Silicon Valley Urban Debate League. I'm also an alumni of the league. And our students today are going to be talking about a very interesting topic. And so they're going to be discussing the questions of whether we should be allowing unrestricted speech on moral and political issues, and whether it should be necessary to protect student civil liberties on universities and college campuses. And also that whether we should have freedom of speech and how it should be balanced with institutions' obligation to create a culture of mutual respect. And introducing our three speakers, our first speaker is going to be Frank Shao. He is a junior from Independence High School, and he's going to be advocating for absolute free speech. Our second speaker is Caitlin Nguyen. She is a sophomore from Silver Creek High School, and she's going to be advocating for freedom of speech with the limitations of speech that incites violence. And our third and final speaker is going to be Ria Teagi, and she's a junior from Mount Pleasant High School, and she's going to be talking about freedom of speech with the limitations on offensive discussions involving immutable characteristics. And a couple of things to just note before we hop right into our speeches is that this isn't going to be a debate. This is going to be three separate original oratories that these students have prepared for. And so because of that, students may disagree on certain areas of freedom of speech, but you will also see areas of concessions and agreement. So we're going to see some clash. We're going to see some areas that they both agree on. And hopefully this will facilitate a really good discussion and something to talk about also after the event. So to start us out, I'm going to allow Frank to come to the podium and begin.
Okay, starting on my first word. The question I've been asked, quite an interesting question, is allowing unrestricted speech on moral and political issues necessary to protect student liberties. Yes, and for many reasons. Firstly, we must realize the inherently sinister nature of the question itself. If we remove free speech from one area, it implies that free speech itself is not necessary. Rather, we are treating it as a privilege than a right. This is a dangerous mindset to bring because free speech is as important to our way of life as the freedom of religion or to pursue life, liberty, and the happiness it guarantees. Free speech is essential to the very body politics of America. It must be seen as the air in the lungs of our democracy and something so essential that death would follow by removing it. Consider the historical importance of free speech. Without the ideals of free speech and the ability to talk about political issues untampered, we would not be a nation itself. As Benjamin Franklin once said, whoever would overthrow the liberty of nation must begin by subduing the freedom of speech. We continue this tradition that inspires change and creation in America by protecting free speech. Second, it may seem that the social cost of free speech is high, but realize this, the cost of silencing free speech is much higher. Historically, banning free speech to protect people from themselves is one of the greatest signs of oppressive silencing, and it must not be allowed. We must realize that by giving the power to limit the speech, we give the power of the oppressors to restrict the people's voices. If you believe this would never happen, that somehow this is a dream fantasy, this would never happen. They would never abuse these rights. Harvey Silvergate, an attorney and co-founder of the Foundation of Individual Rights and Expression, recently discussed free speech regulations at the University of Brandeis. He noted, universities should have no political position whatsoever. Universities should have no place where political diverse views can be peacefully exchanged views and ideas. But this was not the case in one of these universities. A university named after Justice Brandeis, he added, banned the discussion of free speech in the context of pro-Palestinian rallies. He stated that Justice Bailey's would be turning over in his grave, referencing the speech regulations at Brandeis University. The school's namesake itself was over one of the Supreme Court judges that were famous for advocating for speech. So how could this idea have been turned so quickly? Realize that this idea of free speech is extremely fragile. As Lord Acton once said, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Who gets to decide what speech is free and what is acceptable and not in all spheres? Why should one entity, why should one university, why should one governing body at this educational establishment be allowed to decide who gets to say what and what should be talked about? Why should a group of elites take the power to protect others from themselves? Why should one thought process be allowed to decide what others think? Realize this, we're taking away the power of the people. Regulations on free speech lead to a dark future. Suppose we continue down this path and embrace a society in which our ideals must be fit into a narrative which these people in power agree in. In what case, we're creating a future, what a future prophetic author like George Orwell warned us about. A future that resembles 1984, as in the book, the overlaying powers tries to enforce a singular ideal, quite similar to the effects of banning free speech or regulating it. As Orwell noted, if citizens are not allowed to speak their opinions freely and are not allowed to think or even be individuals, we are melting people together. We are moving the individuality of people by regulating free speech. Our society is on the cusp of an important question, a de-evolution to an abyss where ideas are suppressed, or elevation into a realm of freedom where creatives, artists thrive, where the ideas of tomorrow are beautiful rather than gray and monotonous. Third, we must realize the largest and most guaranteed impact of the restriction on speech is we suppress and bottle the issues facing our nation. What we are asking, in effect, by regulating free speech is for the Americans of tomorrow to hold in their passion, hold in their ideals, by asking the Americans of tomorrow to bottle up their issues, to hold them in the deepest corners of their heart. We ensure a world without dialogue. Ideas are not shared or disputed, and echo chambers become the norm. If we kill freedom of speech, we lose the most vital tool to fight hate and bring prejudice to light so we can defeat it. We cannot fight the enemies of intolerance if we cannot see them. By blocking the sharing ideals, what we essentially do is allow the buildup of pressure, a soda bottle that is only inevitably going to explode. This soda bottle obviously referencing America. Fourthly, what we have to realize is that the issue that currently plagues the nation is the issue of misinformation. This issue is only exacerbated through the loss of free speech because the inherent nature of misinformation is that it thrives when there is less dialogue occurring. It bans the discussion of ideals. It bans the criticisms of belief. Suppose we are essentially creating a bubble in which we restrict ourselves and encourage the sinister nature of misinformation. In that case, it consumes us until we are all wrongly influenced, leading to terrible situations for the future. We have to realize that we cannot bottle the ideals of tomorrow. We cannot bottle how people think. We cannot bottle the issues that Americans face. And for all those reasons, I believe free speech must be upheld.
That is a very strong start. All right, so I didn't get a chance to explain the format of this, but after each speaker, they're gonna have 2 minutes to be cross-examined by their other two counterparts. So Frank, I'm gonna have you stay here in the podium. I'm gonna let Kayla and Aria ask you questions, and I'm gonna start timing. So, whenever you guys first start.
So my first question to you is that how do you reconcile the idea of unlimited freedom of speech with the potential harm that it may cause, such as spreading hate speech or misinformation?
I addressed this in my speech itself. We have to realize the issues of hate speech and misinformation can only be addressed by the allowing of this speech to happen, because there's no way to combat this speech, a societal issue, without knowing that the speech exists and knowing how, and being able to have open discourse to counter it.
Should there be any accountability for individuals who use their free speech to intentionally deceive or manipulate others?
We have to realize that we cannot conflate the issues of deceiving and manipulating other people intentionally with the ideas of free speech. The issue of deceiving others and manipulation is an inherently root issue of our society, not of free speech. By banning free speech, we only cause harms and actually don't solve for these issues.
Next, I have a question about the book you're talking about. George Orwell is based on a fictional book. How do you know that this will truly take place if speech is limited?
I'm glad you asked that too, because I've shown in my first constructive that we talk about the Palestinian rally that is being suppressed because this university does not agree with the ideals of pro-Palestinian organizations, and that is a clear example that universities are and will and are willing to restrict free speech.
So can you elaborate further on the first question that I asked? Because I know that there's a lot of times where it could reach more that if it gets to a certain point where people are getting excessively harmed, people are getting excessively violent, that they're usually law enforcement would stop this. So how would you want to counter this with free speech?
If the question is if this speech causes the violence to the point that it could be seen as excessively harming people, then law enforcement would step in. This is not in restriction of free speech. This is a simple ideal of what laws exist for.
So, in light of the recent heated protests on college campuses, the question naturally arises. What is the extent of freedom of speech, and should there be limits on the kinds of speech allowed at institutions of higher learning? According to a poll by the Daily Wire, roughly 85% of Americans think that free speech is more important than not offending others. Out of the 195 recognized countries worldwide, the United States has some of the most strongest protections of free speech. Compared to other global powers, such as Russia and China, the United States has some of the strongest protections of these, and the US law does not prioritize censorship and invites radical ideas to be discussed. In fact, without the discussion of radical ideas during the Enlightenment, there's a good chance that the United States itself wouldn't exist. Free speech led to the Declaration of Independence. So I stand here before you all today to say that I believe in the middle way, a compromise between completely unrestricted speech and restricted speech. And a freedom of speech should be fair, as long as individual safety is not directly threatened, and that everyone has the right to equal participation. In the context of student civil liberties, allowing freedom of speech is necessary to ensure that all others and individuals can freely express their beliefs, their opinions, and concerns without fear of censorship or reprisal. However, it must be balanced with the need that we protect individuals from these harms or direct threats. The sole reason why education exists is to facilitate this exchange of ideas and to challenge the norm. And in this pursuit, universities have to implement firm policies that safeguard both freedom of speech and safety and accessibility of the marketplace of ideas for all on campus. Avoiding these controversial topics would only hinder this pursuit of knowledge. As Robert Reich, a significant political commentator, lawyer, and current professor at UC Berkeley emphasizes, quote, the best way to learn something is to talk to people that disagree with you, because that forces you to sharpen your views and test your views that may even cause you to come out at a different place, end quote. So how do we reconcile the freedom of speech with the understanding that it does not entail the freedom of consequences? The obligation of institutions is to create environments where diverse perspectives can be shared and debated respectfully and productively. There can be freedom of speech, but no freedom of consequence in a way that denies people a right to speak or safety to participate in the community's life. Inherently, certain universally accepted norms, such as advocating for the reinstatement of slavery or promoting child exploitation, these should unequivocally be rejected. Not only would such perspectives threaten the safety of students on campus, but they would deny those same students to have equal standing to be heard. These topics do not merit debate, nor they encourage a critical analysis in a liberal institution that values the voices of all. A large example that we see in the status quo today is the Israel versus Palestine conflict. We have people on both sides from educational institutions voicing their concerns about targeted hate, about feeling unsafe, and receiving overall discrimination everywhere. For example, just this past month, Florida banned the pro-Palestinian activist group, Students for Justice in Palestine, from its public university campuses. At another college setting, American University, a Jewish student felt personally attacked for their existence after being distinctly negatively stared at by all the others in class while they were discussing Palestine. The reason why this is happening all nationwide is because of blame. It's human cognitive bias and an innate emotional response to uphold our viewpoints to the very highest, set it as this unshakable truth. But we have to realize by completely absolving one side, we are polarizing the narrative. Rather than censoring these discussions altogether, universities need to foster constructive dialogue that respects the humanities and rights of all involved parties. Making sure that one approach, we can take many approaches to go for this. One approach could involve convening professors with divergent views for open dialogues. Another, that universities could serve as a neutral ground for mediated open forums, inviting all students to share their perspectives and actively listen to one another's experiences and grievances. We see great success in University of Michigan's Youth Dialogues program, or in Rice University's Dialogues on Diversity, a course designed to explore critical approaches to culture, identity, and dialogue fundamental to living and working at this university. While certain topics may perpetuate hate or deny the lived experiences of certain minorities, others can contribute to understanding and potential resolution. So instead of promoting ethnic or religious superiority, propagating conspiracy theories, or even rejecting the possibility of coexistence and mutual recognition, universities should allow constructive topics, such as asking whether the Gaza blockade is a necessary security measure for Israel, or asking what the role of the international community is in resolving the conflict. These discussions lead to actual change. Solution-oriented questions, open-minded questions, questions that prompt the participants to critically analyze and examine their own biases and their own standing and position in our society. The first set of topics, if anything, only challenge and questions others' safety and equal status as conversation partners. Of course, people have the right to express their beliefs freely, and even if they perceive the opposing viewpoint to be cruel or unjust, this is still okay, because this expression should not compromise the safety of free speech rights or others on campus. And as we've seen repeatedly, universities are still struggling to implement this and follow this concept that we see as quote unquote simple. So we have to say that the fundamental right to freedom of speech is integral to pursuing knowledge and progress in educational environments. While it's imperative to uphold this right, it must be balanced with the responsibility to ensure the equal participation for all individuals in this discourse. University can uphold the principles of free expression while advancing the values of inclusivity, tolerance, and intellectual integrity. Thank you.
How do you define and differentiate between speech that directly incites violence and speech that may indirectly contribute to violence?
So I think with this logic, technically, if you say that we were trying to discern between the two, any speech could be inciting violence or be seen in that type of manner. And that it's clear that we set this precedent that there's no clear way that we can discern between what directly contributes to violence and what indirectly doesn't. And so it's important that with every situation, we are looking at it at a case-by-case basis. So for example, a large example that I see in today's society and the status quo is affirmative action. And on one side, we have people saying that affirmative action should be implemented and that it's to be a way that can help people that had faced systemic racism or wants reprisal for these type of things. But on the other constructive side, on the other side, people say that affirmative action is sort of unfair to all people, that if we have affirmative action, it's unfair to all students. Technically, if you say this, if someone is arguing for affirmative action and saying that it should not be implemented, then you could also say that this indirectly incites violence, correct? This could indirectly incite violence to certain minorities that were helped by affirmative action. But I don't think it's fair that we use this as a reason to completely not be constructive and talk about this dialogue. We should make sure that we're always still criticizing the issue and that we're being constructive about it so that we can have open ideas and making sure that we're always challenging norms and contributing to ideas on campus.
My question is, how can you solve, as you said, the propagating of conspiracy theories without allowing them to come to light by allowing them to talk?
So when I talked about conspiracy theories in my speech, I said that we shouldn't really be allowing this as part of our precedents for free speech rights on campus. Because I believe that a large majority of conspiracy theories, they're known for the manipulation of information. This is distorting information to fit this particular narrative, and a lot of the times, these conspiracy theories set a urgency and a sense of danger. This is not the type of environment that we want to promote on school campuses or on universities. I still think it's okay that we can criticize it, we can talk about it, but by propagating it or spreading it or starting it on school campuses, that's not the right place or the right institutional setting to have these propagating conspiracy theories.
The American people inherently believe every citizen should be guaranteed unalienable rights, such as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These beliefs informed and inspired our Constitution. The job of the Constitution is to outline the government's duties and protect the people's liberties. The most relevant liberty to this debate is the First Amendment, which protects freedom of speech, the press, and assembly. Freedom of speech is an essential First Amendment right that has helped citizens voice concerns, protest, and speak out against injustices. It has helped influential leaders such as Martin Luther King Jr., Susan B. Anthony, and Cesar Chavez achieve freedom and greater equality and has given voices to the marginalized. We cannot deny the importance of freedom of speech. Without it, many of our leaders and activists would not have been able to achieve successes as they did, like the civil rights movement. However, I believe an exception must be made to protect our country. We need to protect our learning spaces. I believe speech needs to be regulated in school settings. This is why I'm advocating that all citizens should be able to say what they want, so long as it does not target someone's immutable traits such as culture, gender, race, body type, or any form of hate speech. This exception allows citizens to speak their minds and ask questions and will help with learning, while also protecting students from the harms they're facing in schools today. First, ensuring that our amendments correctly protect people's rights is important. When the amendment to free speech was created in 1789, the idea of free speech was much different than it is now. When the Constitution was created, hate speech, as we see so prevalent today, was not of the same pressing nature as it is now. Take homophobia, for example. When the Bill of Rights was implemented, homophobic slurs and comments were not used as widely to invoke harm as they are now. In 2022, there was reported 10,897 instances of crime or hate speech towards those who identify as LGBTQ+. As an audience, I want you to think about how huge that number is. And let me clarify, those are only the reported crimes. We can only imagine the amount of undocumented crimes. When researching for this speech, I learned that there's an estimate of 53% of Americans who face some sort of hate speech that year. Some proponents of full freedom of speech may argue that our amendments protect speech in its entirety for a reason. However, during the inception of our Bill of Rights, the specific speech regulation against homophobia, body type, and the other ideas I had claimed weren't added because it wasn't understood to be the same kind of issue it is today. If we choose to stay stuck in our ways with unregulated free speech, condoning hate speech and marginalization towards immutable traits just because they won't mesh with the way things have been done in their past, what good are we doing for our society? Realistically, changing and adding amendments is something we already do today. For example, our First Amendment was ratified in 1791, while our last amendment to the Constitution was in May 1992. The amendments should be relevant to today's society, otherwise they lose their importance. Throughout history, we have changed and implemented rules and laws most relevant to our challenges. If we close our mind to the ability to change, we would still stand for slavery. For example, in 1789, we believed as a society the 3/5 compromise should stand. However, with our knowledge and understanding we have today, we know that all people are inherently equal, and we've guided our society to reframe its thinking. We must build our amendments and Constitution to protect the issues we're dealing with today. Therefore, we should look at the freedom of speech debate with a proper picture and full context. Some speech limitations regarding moral and political issues can cause a major reduction in derogatory language, such as hate speech, which can be defined as offensive discourse towards any immutable traits or abusive or threatening speech that expresses prejudice based on ethnicity, sexual orientation, or similar grounds. Recent cases at Harvard and universities such as Berkeley demonstrate the negative effects of unrestricted free speech. On the Harvard campus, there have been numerous reports of anti-Semitic gestures being made towards Jewish students, yet Harvard did not take action because they believed this was covered within the First Amendment. An exception of the amendments will allow institutions and schools to handle hate speech as they see fit. Without the ability to reprimand negative comments and stereotypes, our world is falling into a further place of systemic hate and violence. Speech restrictions are necessary to create a healthy learning environment for all students. If we change the First Amendment, we can untie the arms of administrators and allow them to regulate schools as they see fit, such as kicking students off campus for saying slurs or banning slurs in general. At the same time, there have been many instances, for example, in the 1960s, when free speech was influential in advocating against injustices. Yet I believe the ability to speak with no restrictions has caused many students to feel unsafe in their school settings. Many students are being persecuted for the religious beliefs they have. For example, with the occupation going on between Palestine and Israel, students from both sides are being targeted, with the war being a popular discussion. And those who say negative things often don't face any follow-up repercussions because our rights state that everyone has the ability to voice their opinion, like in the example of the Harvard case. I am not against people sharing their opinion, since healthy debate, as we're having today, will help us strive and learn. It's important to have opposing opinions and bring up topics that may be difficult. Suppose we created an exception to the First Amendment, balancing the ability to speak and ask questions while posing specific limitations, such as instituting policies in schools that give teachers and administrators the right to handle reprimanding comments as they see fit. Well, in that case, we can prioritize student health and well-being. If changes toward freedom of speech were implemented, this would curtail speech significantly and mitigate the emotional and mental damage an unsafe school environment can cause. My stance on this issue is to restrict hate speech and speech regarding immutable attributes. That still allows people to think and speak freely as long as it doesn't regard those categories. A change in the ability to speak out on moral and political issues can also directly affect those struggling with gender and identity. In 2022, there was a reported 11,643 race-motivated crimes, and 1.3 million kids per year experience bullying. With protection for these students, outlawing hate speech and other harmful terms, we can help a vast majority of America. Limiting hate speech fosters better learning and understanding for all of our students. With anxiety of comments being made and fear of bullying so prevalent today, we have roughly 2 million students quitting school and 1.3 million students, as I previously stated, who are facing the brunt of bullying. This is what the absolute freedom of speech costs. It costs the mental health and humanity of our children.
So you mentioned in your speech about people feeling persecuted for their religious beliefs. So how would you deal with edge cases? So for instance, there are many religious study classes that say things that offend the religious. So some scholars, for instance, they say that they deny that Jesus Christ existed, or others say blasphemous things about the Prophet MD. So should these Muslims and Christians be able to ban that class from happening?
That's a really good question. Well, I think first off, we already have restrictions in place, church versus state. But if there were these classes to be taking place, the only way that they would be in any form restricted is if they're going against people's immutable traits or their connotating of hate speech itself.
You say, would you be able to guarantee free speech while also moderating speech itself?
I wouldn't be guaranteeing free speech per se, but the exception that I would be making is something that we need in our society. As I've previously stated, 1.3 million kids are suffering from bullying, and I've listed thousands of people who've experienced hate crimes within the recent years. Though it isn't full freedom of speech to that extent, people can still share their ideas and pose questions, and that is better for our society.
So do you believe there would be any circumstances where it would be inappropriate to prioritize the freedom of speech over protections for individuals based on these immutable characteristics that you talk about in your speech?
I'd say no, for a simple reason, because I feel like if we let one exception slip by, we're setting precedent for continuing that trend. And at some point, we'll just ultimately revert to the same issue I talked about in my speech.
No.
Okay, so our students are not fully done just yet. They are going to take 5 minutes to construct and edit their summary speeches based on the questions that they just posed to each other. And in the meantime, you guys will have an opportunity to submit questions that they will answer. So the students will have 5 minutes, they'll give their summary speeches. After they give their summary speeches, we're going to allow questions from the audience. So take a second, scan the QR code, think about a question you may have. Maybe it's something particular one individual said, maybe it's a general question that you have for all three speakers. Either is fine. And after they give their speeches, then we'll go to the audience questions. All right, so in the meantime, while our students are preparing, I wanted to talk a little about my experience with the Silicon Valley Urban Debate League. And I've been involved in debate since my sophomore year in high school. I then graduated a couple years back. I competed in policy debate for 2.5 years. In Oak Grove, I was also captain of my debate team. I also competed at a couple of different national tournaments at Berkeley, at Stanford, and I also competed at the Urban Debate National Championships in 2017 and 2018. 2018 was particularly really good for me and my partner, right here, Mia, she's pictured right here. We went to the Urban Debate Nationals, and we went 6-0 in our preliminary round, so we won all our rounds, and then we made it to our quarterfinals, which was a really good for how hard our pool was for our competition. I also got an opportunity to return back to the same tournament after I graduated high school as an alumni ambassador for the National Association Urban Debate League. So I got a chance to coach a team from another Urban Debate League and help them prepare for the same tournament that I did. And it just has been a really great opportunity and such a change in life for me particularly, and the opportunity that SVUDL has given me. And for me, I always felt like I have been particularly someone who has had a lot of different ideas or has a lot to say on their mind, but has always been kind of, scared to speak up. Like, when you're in a classroom and you feel like you want to raise your hand and you want to say something, but like you can't pass the threshold of picking your hand off the side of your arm, or things in that sort. And I feel like through my experiences in debate, I feel like I have gotten better as a speaker and just someone who has more confidence within myself. A couple of different opportunities that I've taken advantage of is our SVUDL's annual moot court. So I participated in our moot court event. So we got to learn like a actual Supreme Court case, get a binder this thick, read the materials, construct speeches, practice in front of actual like circuit court judges in California, be able to compete and to present that in front of a large audience, similar to what their students are doing today, right? They're practicing their public speaking skills, they're doing research, they're creating their own speeches, they're getting questions from themselves and their peers, and they're also going to get questions from you all in a second. And so these different opportunities that the organization has had and has given me has got me a lot of opportunities to grow and be able to participate in like different acts of public speak outside of like the competitive aspect in like policy debate, or if someone does like impromptu speech or things in that sort. And so after I graduated, I also worked at our summer camp, was a lab leader for 2 summers in a row. It was really cool to be able to be with kids for like 6 days in a row and teach them all things about debate, practice things, eat some good food, have some good laughs. Pictured here is also my debate partner and 2 of my coaches during that time. And now I work full-time for the league. And so it's really beautiful to live in a full circle moment where I feel like an organization has helped me grow as an individual, and also seeing the benefits that it has done for me, and then what I want to bring to future students, or even the ones that I have been working with the last couple weeks for this event. And so going back into our mission for SVUDL and seeing how it truly does hone our skills that are within ourselves that we feel like we're just not grasping or allowing to water itself, right? And I feel like allowing students to confidently step into themselves is what we're trying to do. We're not trying to change people. We're trying to figure out how can you be confident in how you present yourself to the world. And I think that is kind of what we are trying to shape our students into. And SVUDL has changed definitely since I've been involved as a student. At the time, we only had policy debate as the form of debate. Now we have all sorts of speech categories. We have impromptu, original oratory. We have different interp categories. We also have world schools, public forum debate, and even got a chance to have A through G elective classes within the Eastside Union High School District, and is also being able to do debate-centered instruction. And so that's essentially like helping teachers take their curriculum and basically craft it in a way where we can use debate as a method to learn. Because a lot of times when we're in classrooms and we're like learning in class, like you're just taking information and regurgitating it. You're not actively engaging with it. So when we use debate-centered instruction, we're making our students critically think. We're making them deconstruct, what is this piece of information telling me? What can I do to respond to it? What can I say as something that could be used down the road? So we're kind of making students interact with the material rather than spinning it out like a machine. And so SVUDL has all the different programs and all the different ways we engage with students, and if anything of these sorts interest you, or you're like, hey, I might have some time on my hand, or I might want to do an event kind of like this in the future with another organization that I'm also a part of, you can fill out our interest form to volunteer with us. And so if you want to put in that time, or you enjoy some of these students' presence, and you want to see them some more, we have a lot of volunteer opportunities for our tournaments and other different events that, we can hold more panels, we can have more interactions with the students, and continue pushing that confidence level within our students in the future. So, thank you. All right, so, as I grab the questions very quickly. Our students are going to do their final speeches, then we're going to do the audience questions. So I'm going to have Frank come up here, continue in the same order. So you're going to come up here, give your final speech, and then we'll go in the order you are sitting in. All right.
Okay, beginning on my first word. Dear audience, I want to summarize this debate in the prospect of 2 worlds. In my world, we continue down this path of beauty and freedom where every American's rights are protected and unalienable. In my world, we fight the beast of misinformation. We fight the beast of hate to the very end to stop the evils of our world, such as from hiding in the shadows. In my world, I protect America from the bottling of emotions from the Americans of tomorrow. We stop the issues that emerge. That is my world. To prevent the authoritarianism that will surely rise when we allow entities to control the speech of our educational campuses. Picture a world so glorious. Picture a world, not a utopia, but quite similar. Picture a world so great. Meanwhile, my opponent's world. In my opponent's world, what we have allowed, because realize this, my opponents, by insinuating that we must take away free speech, we must regulate some form of free speech, have the same issues. In my opponent's worlds, What we have is a world in agony, where the issues of misinformation are hidden from the public, left to stew and mutate into more dangerous and hideous beasts, where the issues of hate grow, where America is a mess from the allowance of the restriction of free speech by entities that should never have that power. In my opponent's world, America is no longer free. America is no longer beautiful. It is a gray, monotonous world that is restrictive, authoritarian, and all allowed cannot be allowed. We, with every action, must protect the right to free speech because it is simply so important to the fabric of America. And that is why I'm hoping that you believe in that too. Thank you.
So to go back, what I had proposed and what I believe personally is that freedom of speech is crucial for learning and progress, but it should not come at the expense of directly targeting individual safety or participation. Universities have to create these environments where diverse perspectives can be debated respectfully and productively. Individuals have the right to express dissenting views, but certain topics such as advocating for hate speech or denying historical injustices are beyond what's acceptable discourse. The crux of the environment here lies in distinguishing between criticizing the ideas and attacking individuals. We must uphold the right to free expression with ensuring everyone feels safe and respected to participate in the marketplace of ideas. With these clear boundaries, universities can create truly inclusive learning environments that nurture both intellectual growth and social responsibility. So in Frank's advocacy for completely unrestricted speech, there's this risk of allowing harmful speech that can incite violence, spread hate, or promote misinformation without any accountability or consequence. And in Ria's approach to restricted speech, it may hinder the university's ability to promote important discussions that we must be having. Thus, the most efficient way is to find ourselves somewhere in the middle. In the grand scheme of things, I believe that my stance on free speech in educational settings paves the way for a future filled with meaningful dialogue and mutual respect. And I envision a world where universities become vibrant marketplaces of ideas, where diverse voices can be heard and challenged in a constructive and inclusive environment. This approach, where freedom of expression thrives alongside the safety and dignity of all the people on campus, encourages critical thinking and pursuit of knowledge without compromising anyone's well-being. By creating spaces that value diverse perspectives and cultivate understanding, we pave the way for a future where we can collectively tackle complex issues and find the solutions that benefit everyone. This is the future.
Suppose we implement an exception to the freedom of speech as a society. It would promote healthy debate, encouraging questions and challenges without attacking individuals. In that case, our mental health and well-being in school will rise. Safety is a prerequisite for exercising freedom of speech. If you're unsafe, you can't exercise your rights because you fear retribution. This is why identity has to be protected in academic spaces. If an exception of freedom of speech was implemented, people will have increased trust in institutions and schools, and in turn, have the motivation to learn more and share. I have a question for the audience. How many times have you had an opinion that you've been too scared to say out loud? I want you to think about why. I want you to remember a moment in your past where you wished the world was a kinder place, or that people had the moral compass to refrain from hateful comments. This exception is vital to our society and especially to schools and institutions. In 2022, there was reported 13,337 crimes of hate speech as a total. And to reiterate, a sum of 63% of those crimes were race-motivated biases. Our society is delving further into hate and engraving a mindset into our children coming of age, condoning harmful comments and speech. There have also been numerous tests stating that the brain itself changes when facing trauma such as hate speech, which can be defined as emotional trauma or physical. We are physically reshaping our students and children to think and view the world differently with the lens that their voice does not matter enough. Institutions cannot effectively defend their students, and worse, 9 out of 10 people do not face repercussions for their hateful comments, which in turn affirms the negativity of hate speech. Limiting hate speech and speech regarding immutable attributes in 2022 could have saved 13,337 lives. That's 13,000 lives that could have gone on to be mothers, fathers, doctors, influential lawyers, or engineers. Free speech may seem intriguing at face value, but the question is it enough to risk many people's mental and physical livelihoods?
All right, let's give another round of applause for our students, please. One more. All right. So as we gotten through the form from your submitted questions, we're gonna have about 15 minutes to answer as many questions as we can. Some questions might apply to multiple speakers, or they might be more focused to one speaker. But I'm just gonna go ahead and start. So our first question is for you, Frank. So let's say you're having a debate on campus. If I'm free to threaten and dox my opponent or instruct audience members on how to slash tires while no one's looking, for example, what value does that add to the conversation if there are no repercussions?
Realize this, I'm not advocating for the lack of repercussions. I'm advocating for the lack of the restrictions on the type of speech we can be having. We cannot, time and time again, we can't conflate the issues of our moral society, of somehow targeting other people with the fact that free speech exists. These things are not inherently causing each other.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is for Rhea and Caitlin. So who gets to decide what crosses the line in terms of hateful speech that should be restricted? Who is the decision maker in those situations?
So I think a lot of the times when we're talking about hateful speech that crosses the line, what we have to realize is that these are decisions that we have to make on a case-by-case basis, and we can't really know until we see the full-fledged consequences really play out. Because someone could have the intent to harm someone, and someone could have the intent to not harm someone, but it could still harm people and still direct violence without them knowing. So we have to really understand and realize the full consequences and see how it affects other people's first before we actually take action, and usually the university would step in and take incentive afterwards.
I agree with Caitlin's claim. I think it should be up to administrators and institutions, and it should be a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you. For you, Rhea, so how will you restrict speech on social media and on campus if there are so many people? And so how will you guarantee that every stone is left unturned or not left unturned?
I think on social media websites, there should be a policy instituted that certain phrases or words trigger posts and comments to be taken down. That's something that we already kind of see today. When there are harmful comments or things that go towards someone's gender or race, there are already things instituted to take those measures.
Thank you. For you, Caitlin, how would you respond to critics who argue that allowing any exceptions of freedom of speech sets a dangerous precedent for censorship and government overreach?
So I think we also have to look at the dangerous incentive that we could have if we don't put in limitations or restrictiveness to free speech. By allowing all free speech to be allowed on university campuses, we are directly making sure that we don't have the consequences that some people that are there to incite violence, specific violence to people and make other certain individuals on campus to feel unsafe, they do not get the consequences. And so I think it's important that we need to restrict people or restrict it to some certain degree where it's directive and is actually trying to hurt people so that everyone gets the best outcome of it all.
All right, thank you. For you, Frank, you talked a lot about how freedom of speech is an American value and it's important to us as a country. So can you provide examples of situations where unlimited freedom of speech has resulted in positive outcomes for our society?
I'm glad you asked. One of the main reasons, and actually reason for the birth of our nation itself, is unrestricted free speech. If the British were like, oh, you can't talk about breaking away from us, the 13 colonies, you can't talk about breaking away from us because we don't believe in that speech or we don't let that speech happen, would we have ever become a nation? No, that is one of the, that shows the vital nature of free speech itself.
Okay, thank you. For you, Ria, who should define an immutable quality and the protection if then permissive? For example, not all state laws honor and protect trans rights equally, and these would arguably not be defended or protected to the same degree. So who defines what is an immutable quality or characteristic, state to state?
I think it's a hard question, but I think that the individuals, part of the government should hold a meeting or some sort where we can effectively outline what we feel is best. I feel like for this question, the people should really be involved. I think that specifically regarding trans rights, I feel like that is an immutable characteristic. I feel like that's something that would also go into that as well.
Okay, thank you. And a question for all three of you. Is it okay to regulate the time and place of free speech? Bless you. Is there a good time versus is there a bad time? Are there areas where you're allowed to regulate it, or are there any certain areas where it can't be restricted?
I believe that any time that free speech wants to be expressed should be expressed. There is no thing as, is there a good time or a bad time? The time it wants to be expressed is the time it should be expressed.
For me personally, because today we're talking about universities and educational institutions, I think there is a clear difference between whether you're just out there on an internet and whether you're inside a university educational institution, because the idea or the reason why these universities exist, as I said in my speech before, is to encourage and promote the marketplace of ideas. And so we should be more careful and we should be more concerned about upholding and restricting speech in a way that protects people in these educational institutions so that everyone and their voice can be equally heard.
My idea differs more. I believe that people in general should not be targeting anyone's immutable traits or making any form of hate speech in general. As I've talked about in my speech, I've stated the statistics more than once, and how many people are being affected by it. I think as a society we should step away from it as a whole. It's something that isn't vital to our country. It's not something that we need. It's truly choice.
Okay, thank you. This question is for Ria and Caitlin. How can educators foster an environment where students feel comfortable expressing their opinions while also being mindful of the potential impact on others?
So I think I implemented or talked about some ways that we could have this sort of constructive dialogue in university settings. I think there's multiple approaches, but we could make sure or implement it. We've seen in real life examples in the University of Michigan, in Rice University, they have their own discussion forums, they have their own courses that talk about promoting dialogue on their campus. So I think this is just one example of ways that we can promote equal standing and equal free speech for everyone so that we can have a constructive debate and healthy debate.
I agree with Caitlin, although I feel like there should be some blanket terms and phrases that we just don't say in schools at all.
Okay, thank you. And for Frank, how would you address concerns about the potential for abuse or exploitation of unlimited freedom of speech, particularly in online spaces?
The idea of these abuses or these exploitations of free speech on these online places, we have to realize that I am talking about the usage of free speech, and if you want to say something, you can say something, but this does not extend to, if I want to break the law, I can break the law, because I'm not saying that we should allow the breaking of the law, especially on online stages. I'm simply advocating for the unrestricted use of free speech.
Thank you. And a final question for all three of you. What would you change about how American politics works today based on your insights from SVUDL? Knowing that your interactions with other students of color, knowing what we talk about for like advocacy, and knowing that we want you guys to speak about your personal voice, but also be conscientious of other people, how would you want to change American politics, knowing all this information?
I think, as previously stated in my speech, our Constitution, our amendments, everything within that realm should reflect the will of the people, what we need based off of the issues that we're facing today. I think in those regards, with my knowledge from SVUDL, I would try to advocate for the voice of the people.
Yeah, I also think that we should be taking this into consideration when we're discussing free speech, is that talking about all these different types of people that come from diverse backgrounds and diverse heritages and their own unique stories, and we should take that into consideration when we're discussing whether we should have free speech for like everyone and everything, because their voices are just important as anyone else's, and we need to make sure that everyone has equal participation in this debate.
On the talk of the American government and its relation to SVUDL and how I kind of view what changes need to be implemented, there are obviously very like policy-based changes that I believe should be implemented, but one of the main things that need to be implemented now is the inclusion of communities as a more active role in the United States political system.
All right, thank you guys all. Let's give a round of applause for our speakers. As you can see, our students are well prepared for even questions that they have been practicing on versus questions that they're getting on the whim. And I'm just proud about all the effort they have put into this today. I'm thankful for everyone who came today. I also want to give thanks to the Bill community for the wonderful opportunity for our students, particularly thank you to Cindy Oyoung and also Shantae Surency. I also want to thank the Makahakama Foundation for supporting our scholars and letting them shine, particularly Joyce Chung and Joyce Song. And thank you for all the students who decided to come on a weeknight and spend their time with us, and just to be able to support your peers. And thank you for the rest of the professionals.